Hey everybody, it's me, Chris Herman, here for another episode of On Deck, a special episode, episode 99. Yes, 99 episodes of On Deck are now fully recorded and almost live, so that's a big day. Today my guest is a repeat guest. It's Jason Henry. You might remember Jason from a few months ago. Met Jason at a tantra event that my wife and I attended 4 or 5 months ago or so. And Jason is back today to share some new experiences that he's had in terms of growth and development over the last few months. And so we dive into a lot. We talk about tantra, we talk about ayahuasca, we talk about aliens just a little bit. And I really enjoyed the conversation and know that you will too. So without further ado, here we go. It's Mr. Jason Henry. Well, we're rolling.
Awesome.
Jason, welcome back, man.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
How are you, buddy?
I'm amazing.
You've had some interesting experiences over the last period of time. It's probably been what, about 3 months?
Yeah, about 3 months. And I'd have to say in those 3 months, I probably have had the biggest spurt of growth in my entire life.
For those, that need the introduction, Jason Henry is you're a repeat guest here on the podcast. We did our first episode about 3 months ago, and we had met. My wife and I attended a tantra workshop that you and your at the time girlfriend were putting on, and then we did the episode. We had a really interesting conversation, and now here we are, about 3 months later, and a lot has changed in your life. So just to tee a few things up. We were just talking about, some military stuff that I'd like to get into with you at some point in time.
I know you do, yes.
But let's just why don't you update on everybody? Wow, see, I haven't done a podcast in like a couple weeks. I'm a little rusty. What's been going on, man?
Well, you touched base on the fact that my then girlfriend, of course, I had the breakup. I had COVID, unfortunately.
Right.
I had skirted by the last several years, just, kind of not taking as many precautions as a lot of the people that I know. I mean, we are blessed being here in Florida, South Florida. So we didn't have as many of the restrictions that a lot of other places did.
Amen to that.
I know, my God. But, I considered myself a very lucky soul for quite some time. And boy, it hit me hard.
Did it?
It did. In fact, I didn't know it previously, but apparently there is some likelihood that some people that catch COVID get a stroke because COVID does cause blood clots, and occasionally they zip up to the brain. Mm-hmm. So the very first day that it hit me, I used to experience these things after the war called cluster headaches. Cluster headaches are super painful. In fact, so painful they call them suicide headaches because a lot of people end up, putting an end to the pain any way they possibly can. It feels like a hot poker in your left eyeball usually. And I thought I was experiencing one of those, which was odd because I hadn't had them for almost a year. And then it just felt radically different. And it's hard to explain. It's almost as if, like a reset button was pushed on my brain and my central nervous system. And the strange thing is, life has this strange way of taking what your biggest fears are and putting them right in your face. And for the longest time, I wasn't scared of COVID. And here it hit me hard. I'm not scared of heart attacks or anything like that, but I've always been scared of having a stroke because I know that a stroke, some of the mitigating factors are similar to the heart attack. And, I work out and I keep myself healthy and I eat a good diet and I try to live a stress-free life. But the uncertainty of when a stroke could hit and the fact that, sometimes you could be paralyzed after the stroke or left in a vegetative state, always kind of the loss of control in the situation always scared me. And
So,
here it hit me.
I'm curious, but how did you? I mean, what did you do? What you said, you felt like you were having one of these massive headaches, but then you noticed something different. So
it shifted, yeah.
What did you do? I mean, and how did you determine that you in fact had a stroke? Because you don't look like you had a stroke.
I know.
You don't sound like you had a stroke.
Luckily, I mean, my tongue was numb for a little while. I couldn't really. I stumbled with words and had a difficult time talking. And you know, of course, this was the first day that I got COVID. So several days after, I pretty much spent the entirety of it in bed. I had done 2 different tests to find out that if it was in fact a stroke, and both of them came back as not 100%, because one's an EEG test and the other one is like a test where you've got to like look in certain directions and blink a bunch of different times while they're looking in your eyeball, basically. So they, you know, I go through the VA hospital, and so they scheduled me an appointment with a neurologist, and who will eventually do an MRI to find out if there's any lesions on the brain. Mm-hmm. It's a great way to try to find out, because if a blood clot was big enough and it passed through the brain, it's going to cause a little bit of damage. So they can spot those in an MRI, is what I was told.
But I'm still curious, like I mean, so something registered inside of you to say, I need to get checked for this.
Correct. It was unlike any experience I've ever felt in my entire life.
So you're like, maybe I had a stroke?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
But without any of like the numbing sort of losing sensation?
I'm telling you, if I feel like most people that have had strokes, at least the first stroke that they have, they're it's a feeling unlike anything you've ever experienced before.
Right.
So you start to ask some questions, and not all strokes lead to partial paralysis or full paralysis or anything like that. I mean, it really depends on the size of the blood clot and how much damage is done. But I do have to say, I don't look at it as a bad thing, because now after I had this experience, and I'll find out later down the road if it was 100% a stroke. Hopefully they're able to tell me that. But I'm no longer scared of strokes anymore. You know, I think the fear that most people have are the fear of the unknown, I would imagine, right? So, you know, now I get to experience life with one of my biggest fears completely neutralized.
Where did this fear come from? Like, how does one have a fear of stroke?
Well, I'm an anatomy and physiology geek. I spend way too much time trying to research how the not just how the brain works, but how the body functions overall. Right. Everybody's got their one guilty pleasure that they like to, you have music. Yeah. And I spend a lot of time trying to memorize how the body works. I mean, everything from hormone levels to how muscle fascia operates, how the isometric motion of different muscles operate. I mean, it goes along with what I do for work, but it's just been an innate curiosity for a large percentage of my life. And I do know somebody whose father had a stroke when I was younger, and I just remembered thinking, wow, you know, as a kid, you think if someone could become paralyzed, it's because of, you know, like an accident, or so, you know, they hit their head, or they got in a car accident or something like that. But to just be sitting on your couch and then boom, 3 minutes later you can't operate half of your face. I don't know. That always that always kind of scared me.
Interesting. My grandfather had a stroke. You know, he was in his late 70s, early 80s at the time. I remember, you know, they were living in Colorado, and he was lighting the fireplace, and all of a sudden, just like, you know, but it didn't affect him like massively. Yeah. You know, but he did get, you know, some of that little droop and a little bit of that loss of sensation and control on one side of his face and body to some degree that was with him for most of his life. But I mean, it wasn't serious. But
all I can say is whatever I had, if it was you know, if it was the stroke, good. Now I no longer have to be scared of it. If it wasn't a stroke, then at least I know what a stroke might feel like a little bit, so at least I can live life comfortably without having that fear, which is quite nice.
I have a question, and it's kind of a personal question, but I like it's my number one curiosity right now about this. Did you get the jab?
Did I get the jab? I did not get the jab.
You did not?
I did not, and I'll tell you why I didn't get the vaccine. Is because when they say follow the science, I had a hard time. My sticking point was when they started ordering people to go ahead and get the vaccine that had recently recovered from COVID.
Yeah.
When you have the antibodies in your, in your system, that's not following the science. Like if you just recently got COVID, what's the point of getting a vaccination?
I'm so relieved that was your answer. Okay. Because, we did not get vaccinated either. And I did have COVID.
Yeah.
And I didn't have it was a long 2-week cold that also took an additional 2 weeks to recover from. But I did not get the vaccine, nor my wife. None of us did, and I'm very happy. And so when you told me that you had like a blood clot and a potential stroke, I hate to say it, my mind was like, oh, I wonder if he got it from the vaccine, because there have been a lot of blood and cardiovascular related injuries and death as a result, right? And
Correct.
So I knew I had to ask you the question, right? But I was kind of afraid you were going to say yes, because I didn't want to have to go down that road with you. But at the same time, I also didn't want to. But I also did not want to avoid the question. So,
of course. And I'll say this now so we don't fall down the same trap as Joe Rogan did. If you got the vaccine, wonderful.
Yeah.
Just consult your doctor.
Exactly.
It's as simple as that.
And that's how I feel about it too. It's a personal choice, and most of my family did. And fine.
Oh yeah.
Fine. Good. I just I'm glad that I didn't. And if other people are glad that they did, that's fine. It's a personal choice. I'm with you though. This whole forcing and like
that was a big stickler for me. When you say, hey, you just recently had COVID, but go ahead and get vaccinated anyway. And when there's such a push, someone's telling me to do something so forcefully, I'm probably gonna rebel. That's just my nature. So
it tends to be a lot. Okay, all right, good. We made it through that. So you're healthy.
Yes.
You've recovered. COVID, it sucks.
It does.
But it's totally survivable for most healthy people.
It is.
Which is good. And thank God, after all this time, as a combination of, and listen, I would say clearly vaccines have made a big impact on being able to help the whole world move forward in a lot of ways, right?
Please.
So
I've been vaccinated with every other type of vaccine. So
Me too. All right, so I'm so relieved that I was like, oh God, I gotta ask this question. All right. Anyway, but so let's keep going. So all right, but I know you're more interested and more intrigued by, and so am I, this feeling of reset that you've experienced over this
exactly.
period of time.
Well, it's strange because it's a metaphor. This reset button that was kind of pushed on my brain and central nervous system kind of correlates with what has happened since the last time I saw you. I've had a great reset in my life in general. I'm still doing tantra, which is what you came to see me for the first time. And my business has flourished, absolutely flourished. I've had that breakup, but that breakup, I'm happy that it happened. I'm very happy that it happened. And the reason why I'm happy that it happened is it brought out a brand new version of myself. I won't go into details because, she is still...
it's personal.
It is personal, but we both made mistakes. But the big deal is now I get to move forward in life and be who I genuinely am. Before, there was always a sense because, my ex was with me during a very inspirational growing period of my life.
Right.
And now I get to utilize those tools that I learned during that period. I no longer get to be somebody who needs to people please. Those that have watched the previous podcast know that I came from a very abusive and very challenging childhood. Mm-hmm. And what abuse victims, what we tend to go through is, how do I put this? We tend to nurture our relationships from that point going forward as a safety net. We tend to try to over exaggerate who we are as a person and people please the people that we try to develop these bonds with as a safety net, so we have a support system in case we fall again. You know, like a lot of times abuse victims will be overly supportive to the abuser in an effort to make sure that they still have that person in their life to catch them if they fall. And they tend to repeat that cycle over and over and over again. So now I get to break that mold. Now I get to move forward in relationships, romantic relationships, friendly relationships with people going forward, being my own genuine self. I get to put into play what I developed during that last relationship, during that last period of my life. Now I'm comfortable saying no when I really feel like saying no. Now I get to comfortably be who I really am in the moment. And now I get to start relationships from that wonderful space of just being who I am without having to worry about needing that person as a safety net in case things fall through.
I have a friend who's been on the show a couple times, and he's gotten to this point in his life, and I admire this and I laugh about it, because he's very clear at this point in time. He'll say to me, to anybody, hey, listen, I just want you to know that, like, if we go do this thing together, right? And if I'm not having a good time, I'm just leaving. Like, don't be, like, if we're at a concert or we're doing something and for whatever reason, 2 songs in, I'm just like, nah, I'm not into it. I'm just going to leave. That's not, don't take that the wrong way, but I just don't want to spend time doing anything I don't want to do anymore.
Isn't that wonderful? And it doesn't have to just be for activities. What's funny is we can fail at things that we dislike doing. So if we're looking at it as a job opportunity or work opportunity, we can easily fail.
Jump back up on the microphone there.
We can easily fail at doing things that we dislike. So why not just spend what little bit of time you have on Earth? We just have a fraction of time. We have, 75, 80 years at most. So, and a good chunk of that is growing up.
Let's go for
so if if you have the percentage of failure or the opportunity for failure of doing things that you dislike in life, or even if you're just doing events like your friend going to that concert, well, why not spend your time doing something that your heart wants to do? Doing something that you actually enjoy. Because then, let's say if it's in the workspace and you fail, well, hell, you just got to spend time doing something that you love.
Totally. It's just so funny. I'm still thinking of this guy, and like, he's gotten that point, as I'm getting there as well too. When people say, "Hey, do you want to go do this?" No, no.
Isn't no a great answer? Yeah. Doesn't it feel great?
And it makes me think. You ever watch Curb Your Enthusiasm with Larry David? Like, he's like the ultimate curmudgeon, right? Like, but there's something honest about that when they're like, "Hey, do you want to do this?" He's like, "No, that wouldn't be fun for me at all." Right? And it comes across as being totally rude and off-putting. But he's being dead honest. And it's, what? It's like getting to that point where you're just like, nah, I don't want to do that.
Exactly.
That's okay.
And how often do we do that? I hate to say it, but I did that in my last relationship over and over and over again. No, just going along with the flow.
Oh, yeah.
We all do that.
Yeah.
We all do that.
Well, you're trying to, you're making the effort, right?
You're making the effort. But if it's not something that you thoroughly enjoy, and that's the thing, you might be making the effort, but deep down inside, you're disappointing the person that you're making that effort for. Because what they really want is you to be genuine and be yourself. Well,
in some cases, they are hoping that you're going to enjoy it to the same level that they do. And if you're I'm making the effort, I'm going to do, and I can think of a few things like this, and it's just part of your development as a human in a relationship. But it's like, you make the effort to go, be a part of something. Yeah. But if you're not into it, it shows, and the other person feels it, right?
Oh, for sure.
So it's just like, okay, we don't, we can understand that we each have things that we like more than, you like certain things, I like certain things. Sometimes we do those things together as a means of sharing the experience.
Bonding experience.
Right?
Yeah.
But we don't always have to do it, right? Because it's like, I wouldn't want my wife to come along to something multiple times that she's just not digging that much, right? Occasionally, if she's got a good attitude about it, let's check it out, great. But I don't expect her to have the same loves of things that I love. I mean, I could go to some shithole fucking rock club and watch some dirty ass punk rock band play once a week. I don't.
CBGB in New York.
That was where I spent so much time.
If you say shitty and dirty, then that's pretty much the place. Yeah,
that's the one, right? And I spent plenty of time there in high school. and early college years. But that's not for everybody, right? That's not for everybody. Yeah. Just because I dig that doesn't mean that somebody else is.
Oh, trust me. Yeah. I know many people that be walking around with some, Lysol at that place.
I never used the bathroom there. Thank God.
I have, and unfortunately, you were a very wise man.
It is a place. It is a horrible place of legend.
But that was part of what gave it its infamy, basically.
Right. You didn't have to take a shit there, did you?
No, thankfully I didn't.
Right? I can't imagine anybody even, unless you were just about to explode, I don't know why anybody would, because there was no stall. There was no, it was like literally like a toilet sitting in the middle of like this horrendous.
I don't think they cleaned in 40 years.
Oh, that's just awful. All right. Well, we didn't come here to talk about this, the shitter at CBGB's, but somehow we managed to get there.
Full spectrum. We're covering everything.
Well, that's what happens when you start to get to know somebody. At a certain point in time, you start talking about poop. It just happens. All right, what are we talking about?
We were talking about people pleasing. Exactly.
I say no to that toilet.
Yes,
there we go.
I would say no to that toilet as well. So, like since the last time you saw me, since the last time I was on this podcast, I've had this profound growth. I mean, like I said, my business has exploded. And I'm quite happy for that. I've been working on writing a book. I'm probably about 80% done with the manuscript now.
Oh yeah?
Oh yeah. It's about building a connection with yourself and with others around you. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's tantra inspired because that's what I do for a living.
Right.
But it's about finding who you are as a person. Like every single relationship that you have with anybody should start with the relationship for yourself. Just like you go and you take a flight and they give you that briefing and they say, if you're a parent, make sure you put that mask on yourself before you put it on your kid, because it's not going to be useful if you pass out and then you can't put it, on your kid, period. And so it's the same thing. Like, every relationship, whether it be romantic or not, needs to start with just figuring out who you are, figuring out what you want in life, figuring out what makes you happy, and then growing on that. Because if we're talking about romantic relationships, your romantic partner wants you to be the best quality person that you could possibly become, and wants you to thoroughly be happy with yourself. I mean, those are very attractive qualities. You would agree, right? So by focusing your relationship, not by the relationship that you have with somebody else and that bond that you have with somebody else, but by really centering that attention on the bond that you have with your own self, and doing the investment physically by staying healthy and working out, by mentally, by challenging yourself, by whether diving into work opportunities or growing intellectually by taking classes, and then also spiritually by taking some spiritual classes or doing things that you can see as a mental vacation where you're still building importance for yourself. Like those key factors stimulate personal growth. And if you don't have personal growth, then you're always going to feel like you're missing a key component of yourself and your own happiness. So by building that relationship with yourself and making yourself, I'm not saying that you need to be egotistical or you need to be selfish or greedy, but what I'm saying is like, hey, like if you have some free time, do something that makes you happy. If you have I say take at least one day a week. Take a day that that you can tackle things, in a light manner, and just focus on doing things like you play the guitar. Like spend some quality time doing something. Because so many people get so caught up in life and people pleasing that they spend all of their energy and focus doing stuff for other people, or they sit around on the couch playing video games.
Yeah, I don't do that.
I don't either. I can't stand video games.
No, and I don't. I don't know that I spend a lot of time people pleasing. It doesn't mean that I don't try to be pleasing to people,
correct,
and understanding and whatever. But while my wife and kids were away the whole summer in Russia, I didn't go to the beach once, and we live a mile from the beach, right? And my wife was like, I can't believe you didn't go swim in the ocean. And normally I would, right?
Yeah,
but I have just had such a burning passion about music for a period of time now that it's It's basically the first thing that I think about when I wake up in the morning, and it's usually the last thing I'm thinking about before I go to bed, right?
So now you had this free time without the wife and the kids.
I was here.
You got a chance to really...
I was here almost every minute, either playing or tinkering or thinking about like, and like I'm crazy about it, but like, okay, is this guitar the best guitar for this song? Like constantly thinking about like our set list and crafting this thing. It's what gives me an incredible sense of joy. And I don't know that joy is the right word. I'm not like, like while I'm doing it, but I love to do it. I can spend hours playing, thinking about music, tinkering with shit around here. I like, this whole place. That gives me a great sense of joy. Now I do know that I'm a little out of balance, right? Because 2 years ago, I was, very aggressively training for triathlon and in my best shape, right?
Yeah.
Fast, but I didn't have all the guitar stuff going on then, right? I didn't. Like I had.
But you weren't waking up in the morning wishing that you were running. I'm sure you were still waking up in the morning wishing you were.
No, I was. I was
majorly
like focused on training. I was getting up at 3:45. And I love that version of me. I've had a hard time getting back to that because there's something else in my life that is sort of fulfilling me.
Yeah.
But I also recognize it's like, okay, I have to balance it out. I have to bring this piece back, right? It can't all be this, I've got to bring this piece back to balance it all out. And by bringing this piece back, then I can move everything forward.
Yeah.
Because if I don't take care of myself, and you know this, if you don't take care of yourself physically, you're not really your best, and you're not moving the things forward as you could be.
Exactly.
Right. So but to the point, it's like, maybe sometimes I'm too selfish. Like I do a lot of things that are just specifically pleasing to me.
But hey, during this period while she and the kids were away,
Yeah.
you had the appropriate opportunity to be selfish, to grow. Do you feel like you evolved as a musician just in this short period of time?
Oh yeah, absolutely. 100%.
That's good, right?
Yes.
And does that build your self-confidence as a musician?
Yeah, it definitely in that area of life, and then a little bit in carryover, just in the terms of just having a sense of satisfaction that I'm enjoying doing it.
So I would say it's time well spent, right?
Yeah. Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So, to jump back into what we were talking about is, since the last time I was on this podcast, this period of growth, I've taken time to do the things that I enjoy, like writing this book. Mm-hmm. It's been profound. I would highly suggest for people, even if you're not going to jump into writing a book, like journal, like put your thoughts down somewhere else outside of your head, like the audio notes in the iPhone work amazingly well for this, because the second you can offload it to some place that you have it to listen to later, it means less things are swirling around in your brain. Less things are swirling around on your mind. Like as a tantra practitioner, what I do with all of my clients is to get them out of their headspace and get them thinking intuitively, get them back into their body, get them feeling. Like for tantra, the sensation of touch is super important. And the reason why tantra utilizes that sensation of touch is, to give the brain just a little bit of a break. Like we tend to overly work in, especially as men in our masculine, in the frontal lobe, the frontal cortex of our brain. And we over worry and over stress. I mean, that's how stress develops. It's just the fact that you can't get out of your head. Things are circling around. You have worries and fears and a complete list of different items that you need to accomplish and different things that you need to do. And, for my clients and for the people that go to the workshops for Tantra, it is, very relieving for them to just take a 2-hour break for a while. And so by journaling or by spending time writing this book, I get a chance to sit in that the entirety of the time that I'm journaling or the entirety of the time that I'm writing, and push stuff out of here and into my phone or into my writing. And it's super therapeutic. Mm-hmm. It is. It really is. And it's the biggest thing that I could suggest to anybody who's completely stressed out, is just offloading the things that are stressing them onto another medium, and it's there. They can jump back to it if they need to worry and stress about it later. But at least that brief period of time where they've completely wiped the slate clean for a while, happiness does come.
Yeah, it's there's a number of ways to do that, right? I mean, there's but the act is essentially the same. It's like it either you're communicating it down into the form of the written word or the recorded word. I'm not much of a writer, but I can see myself doing this for the rest of my life, and this will be my
therapeutic release.
And also my way of journaling and chronicling my thoughts.
This is much better than a voice note on the phone.
Yeah, it suits me better, right? Yeah. I don't see myself writing a book. I'm not that much of a sit down and write kind of guy. That being said, there is this quality of it's like, even if you've got a lot of stuff bothering you and you can just have a conversation with somebody who cares or can provide some wisdom.
Isn't that what an entire industry is set up with counseling and with therapy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And that is helpful. I enjoy, the relief that you find when talking to a loved one or a friend. If you've got some stresses or problems, if you talk about it and you get it out, and you can listen to other people's opinion and input on it and what have you, it takes a lot of the stress away. It's stressful because you're holding it inside and you feel like you're the only one dealing with it, right?
Exactly.
And which is nonsense, because everybody's dealing with something like that, right? Everybody. You're not like
it's not a unique experience,
right? Yeah. There is no, and quite frankly, in many ways, there's like no unique experience, right? No. Like, I mean,
we're all a shared experience. I mean, we're living avatars, and we're playing this wonderful video game, basically floating around in these bodies,
right? Our meat suits.
Yeah, exactly. But we all have similar experiences, and what's amazing in life is we get to play the director, the producer, and to an extent, with the exception of family members, the casting director of what experience we get to experience in this world. We're ultimately in charge. We control where our feet take us. We control where we drive us. We control the conversations that we have and the people that we put our face in front of to have those conversations. I mean, we're ultimately in control of our own destiny. And like knowing that you literally have the ability to change your outlook on life and your location and setting and everything like that should give everybody the confidence to just,
Well, there's a lot of fear, though. And I think the fear for a lot of people, comes down to just basic survival mechanisms, right? Like there still is this sort of primordial, fear or drive that most people tend to have of, I either need to be able to provide for myself or I need to be able to provide for my family, and I have to do something to do that. And I think that the people who find themselves most particularly stuck in things that they're just not enjoying don't know how to navigate their way out of that, because they're afraid of, well, if I were to do what I truly wanted to do, right, how will I be able to do this, and this? So that people make trade-offs on that stuff, right? We all do to some degree, right?
We all do.
But I think what is really important, and I've always believed in order to be able to not be in a massive situation of heavy trade-off, right, is to be fortunate enough to realize at a younger age, like, oh, this is what I love to do, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to spend my life doing this, right?
Yeah.
And everybody makes different commitments to that to varying degrees, right? And I think that's an important lesson to share with everybody, because a lot of times people get too far down a track and they're like, well, shit, now I have the house, I have this, I have that, and I'd really like to be this, and it's hard to break away from. Where if we can train that next generation to really understand, like, you got to be responsible, you got to be productive, you got to be responsible, you got to do fucking something. Like, you can't just
float around and play video games all day.
Yeah, you can't just be on a constant, like, who am I journey, right? At some point in time, you got to make some decisions. But at the same time, like, try to make the decisions early on in life to be what it is that you really want to be.
Exactly, because I can't think of a bigger punishment in life or a bigger prison in life is to be stuck in a rut doing something that you hate for the rest of your life. Only what? To pay your responsibilities, to pay your bills,
right?
To support yourself or those that are around you, but every single day you're stuck in a cubicle somewhere. And but God bless the people that are stuck in a cubicle. If you really love doing what you love, that you love to do and happens to be in that cubicle, great. But, if we can get the younger population to start to figure this out and create a clear path to avoid those pitfalls, then it would be wonderful. But
and I also think, there's something, there is something to be said for the people who do just sacrifice to do what they have to do. The person in the cubicle that doesn't love being in the cubicle, but being in the cubicle is putting a roof over their family's head and putting food on the table. Men and women of all sorts have to make sacrifices in order to be responsible and provide. And there is something very decent and dignified and noble about that.
There is.
But unfortunately, in some cases, it does drive people down a path where they're just like, they look back on their life and like, what did I do? Right? Yeah. That you don't want to end up.
Well, what's funny is I actually was just reading a book on this subject. I just finished it a couple of days ago. And, what the book was suggesting was that, sadness and depression are two different things. So sadness, of course, is, something that we all experience. And usually sadness is developed from a fear of you not doing what you need to do in a certain situation and losing something. But depression really is just a great rest for your body. I mean, a lot of times we find ourselves, again, like I suggest, that we're in this avatar. We're floating around in this human form, playing this wonderful game of life. But a lot of times we're not comfortable with what this avatar has become or the world that is floating around this avatar. We're not comfortable in the situations that we find ourselves in. And that's unfortunately where depression and, kind of stimulates from.
Okay, I agree. And I think that whatever situation you find yourself in, I believe you are 100% responsible for that.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And I take that as far as the life you were born into. I believe that our spirit, moves on, and that these lives that we live here are finger snaps in time that are opportunities for us to grow and develop and experience certain things in order to be able to grow and develop our soul, which is on a much longer journey, right?
Oh, of course.
And so, a lot, and I think that sometimes a shitty life might be a necessary medicine for a particular soul.
It is. And a shitty life also, but people don't realize is sometimes the same events keep smacking them in the face. If you have a shitty life, great, because guess what? Like, you are experiencing what we are existing for. And these problems that keep existing in your shitty life,
right?
Like, you continue to get the opportunity to be creative and figure out a solution around those.
Choose a different path.
Exactly. But nobody wants a flat roller coaster. Those are boring as hell. Right. You want something that's got a lot of peaks and a lot of valleys.
But not everybody understands that, and I could be dead wrong, and we could be sitting here talking about this, and we could be 100% fucking dead wrong, right?
Yeah.
And that would be okay too. But the point is yes, like, we are faced with these challenges. You said something like your biggest fear is often like the thing that you have to face on a regular basis, and that is true. And then the question is, okay, well, what decisions are you making in the face of that, right? And are you doing what needs to be done in order for that thing to no longer be a fear?
Exactly, because guess what happens if this thing keeps smacking you in the face and you pass it off to somebody else or you ignore it? Well, guess what? It's going to continue to do that. But when you figure out a creative solution around it, now of course you've grown as a person, and life has a way of continuing to put these problems in front of you until you figure out how to accomplish or defeat them. I mean, it's just the same thing in battle. Like, now you've defeated that opponent, and now you can worry about the next thing.
Right.
And, once you continue to grow and you, as a person, trust me, those those situations, that shitty life is probably not going to keep smacking you in the face.
I'm curious what you think about this, because you talked about kind of a definition for depression. And listen, first I want to say, obviously I am not a psychologist. I'm not a doctor. I don't know what I'm talking about other than expressing my opinions that have been generated over the course of my experience, right? Yeah. To me, depression is anger towards it, turned inwards, right? I think a lot of people, and I've felt it at times too, feel depressed because something about their life or things aren't going the way that they want them to go, right? And maybe they don't have the capacity to fully understand in that moment, well, I'm actually making the decisions that are creating this situation that I don't like being in, right? Yeah. And I think overall people don't like continued failure. They don't like feeling that they're getting further from their goals as opposed to close. Yeah. They don't like relationships that fail. All of these things that people experience as pain and sadness, none of us really like that, right? But for a lot of people, and I'm going to be very clear, I am not saying that there isn't some sort of clinical depression that is a chemically induced state. I don't know, right? But what I do know is this, is that a lot of people continually choose to exist in a world that is depressing to them. It's not what they want it to be, right? Yeah. And deep down, there's got to be some part of them that's like, fuck this, I know I can push myself out of that. Yeah. But then that self-talk comes in and but this and but that and but that, and before you know it, that person is back into their world that's kind of depressing, and they didn't have the fucking balls or the courage to step outside of it and do something, right? Well, yeah. And now they're angry and there's got to be a part of themselves that's angry,
of course,
and that's an energy that creates a negativity. And I think that's my understanding of what depression can be.
Don't you think Michael Phelps would be very disappointed in himself if he was treading water for 3 hours rather than racing and getting to his destination as fast as possible? Mm-hmm. I mean, nobody wants to tread water, and that's really what you're talking about. Is you're just sitting there, just stagnant and struggling. You're still working, but you're not growing. You're not getting to that destination. And I think that you being stuck in that same place, in the same mindset, with the same outside influences smacking you in the face, that does lead to that depression.
Well, and I know that, with myself, we were talking about the physicality thing. I've let that go. Yeah. I am angry at myself about that. There is a continual negative self-talk that is going on with me as I experience waking up in the morning feeling inflammation because I didn't eat the right thing, and the extra weight. There is a voice in my head that's like, dude, what, why, when, right? And I think I am sometimes foolishly waiting for this dose of inspiration. And right at the end of the day, certain things, the inspiration is not coming. You got to just fucking gut through the shittiness to get back on the track, where then that thing becomes a joy again. Yeah. Right now, riding my bike, running or swimming, not a joy at all. It's a misery.
What, no triathlon?
Not right now, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's you're either going to do it or you're not.
Correct.
So I'm talking about myself as much as anything, as we all always are.
I guess a lot of people watching this are probably going to be able to relate, because the same thing that you're talking about with yourself is the same thing that's relatable to every single person on the planet. We all deal with the same issues. Sure, some might deal with more extreme cases than others, but in essence, we all have the same influences in life and the same things that float by our existence, the same troubles, the same difficulties, varying different degrees for certain people, but they're all there. We are all living the same life experience. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
That's a perfect segue.
So I know what you want to talk about.
Yeah. Well, maybe you do. I don't know. So let's talk about this. Let's call it this continued ayahuasca ceremony journey that you've been on, and then the recent, let's call it new ingredients into the
what's funny is I'm actually doing ayahuasca tonight.
Good
in
grief.
Homestead. Yeah.
Right?
So I had, before I got COVID and before the possibility of the stroke, I had done an ayahuasca retreat, an amazing organization that's based in Homestead, very Native American. I mean, ayahuasca is completely legal by a Supreme Court decision for a Native American church.
Right.
It is a religious ceremony. And so this is a Miccosukee gentleman and his entire family. I'm telling you, I did 2 nights in a row. They probably have a family of I swear, 15 people. And they're wearing their Native American headdress and complete garment. And I have been to ayahuasca ceremonies before, and they were all joyous and wonderful. But this felt so authentic because here they are, the chants that are done in my previous ayahuasca experience. And shout out to Shaman Omar. He's an absolute amazing soul, an amazing ayahuasquero. But the same chants that he memorized for these ceremonies are the same sort of language and dialogue that this family, when they talk to each other, they don't talk in English. They talk in the Native American language.
Right.
And so it was amazing. I'd say both experiences for both different nights were about 50 people at each one of them. They hired amazing musicians. They had somebody that their job was just to keep the fire going all night long. It's centered around a fire. They separate the men and the women, and at least initially. And they do a bunch of really interesting ceremonial things like chanting and spitting on you. Yeah, no, I see your face. But they drink this agua de Florida or something and blast it on you to cleanse you during this very Native American religious experience where they're fanning you with feathers and leaves and doing all these chanting and everything. It was a very glorious experience, but I had actually taken it one step deeper. And on the second night had wanted to go as deep as humanly possible. And I had been reading a lot about Terence McKenna. He is a, how do you say this? He is one of the fathers of psychedelic experimentation and psychedelic research back before they started putting things on the banned list in the United States. I mean, for those who don't really know the history of psychedelic research, back in the 50s and 60s were the golden age. I know that LSD and magic mushrooms and things like that, for a lot of people that may be watching this podcast, they look at that in fear, but there were very profound therapeutic uses for those where they did a lot of psychotherapy. I mean, the hippies kind of took it and ran with it, and unfortunately just kind of brought it a little too mainstream, especially during a time that we're fighting in the Vietnam War, and it affected our drafting results and the population of the war. You're dealing with a society that were coming off of World War II, where they felt like the effort of everybody needs to be involved in going to war. And when you have a counterculture at the time that is anti-war, it doesn't vibe. So of course the government took the ability for that continued growth in that research away. But Terence McKenna was one of those forefathers in that, and he had talked profoundly about doing ayahuasca and psilocybin mushrooms at the same time. He had the deepest, most profound experience, but his main problem was he did a little too much, and it scared him away from doing psilocybin mushrooms again for the rest of his life. And so I decided, at that point was my 11th ayahuasca ceremony. And I consider it a very sacred number. I'm born in November. So given the current events and the big drastic shakeup and change up in my life, I wanted to go deeper. So I asked and combined both of those. And I went deeper in that experience than I've ever gone in my entire life. I literally felt like I had achieved Buddhist nirvana. I had the ability to meditate, and I meditate all the time. I meditate almost daily. And I find since the war, it really helps center me as a person. And since my traumatic youth, bubbling through my through my subconscious, I find that meditation helps recenter me and bring me back to me. But most people, when they think of meditation, they think about finding a quiet place and tuning out and stopping all outside influences from affecting what they're trying to do while meditation. And while during this ceremony was going on, and while I was under the influence of both of those combined, I hit a moment in time where I was able to meditate at the deepest level and turn up the volume of everything else around me and still operate in that space with that same level of concentration. It was something that I was previously unable to do, and it is one of the qualities which makes, and I'm not Buddhist by any means, but just because I meditate doesn't mean that I follow every Buddhist philosophy, but I'm interested in these things. Mm-hmm. And what most people think of Buddhism as a religion, it's not necessarily a religion. It's a way of life. It's a way of life about following the middle path, about avoiding extremes. That's why Buddhism has this description of like a steering wheel. It's about controlling your path. And during my meditation, during these ceremonies, I felt like I had achieved what most Buddhists try to achieve to become Buddha. To become Buddha, there's been many Buddhas. We're not talking about just the first Buddha, but Buddha is like, it is a title that's given to you when you've reached nirvana. It's not just a band name. It is the ability to live in the subconscious and conscious, basically providing yourself a space mentally for heaven on earth. It is a level of enlightenment that most Buddhist practitioners try to reach to. And one of the qualities is to be everything and nothing at the same time. And in meditation, most people try again to block, all distractions. But to sit there and meditate and turn up the distractions and still reach that same pinnacle or even deeper is something that is one of the qualities that it takes to become Buddha. And I was very, very happy with myself that evening. I'm going to try to accomplish that this evening as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You going to do the same recipe again tonight?
Do the same recipe. I honestly don't think I'm ever going, if I ever do ceremonies again in the future, I don't think I'm going to deviate from that. It really made all the difference in the world. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think most people, let me back up. I have not done ayahuasca. I would.
Tag along tonight. Let's change your world.
No. That's not a last minute.
No, you haven't had time to prepare yourself with a diet. You have a diet that leads up to it and things like that.
Yeah, that's a big decision.
And by the way, for anybody that does ayahuasca that's seeing me drink out of this teacup, because part of that diet is to avoid caffeine and to avoid tea, right. I'm drinking peppermint tea. So luckily for me, that's not going to affect my experience.
I tried to ply you with caffeine, but
yeah.
I have had a few, experiences with psilocybin mushrooms, mm-hmm. A good time ago. Every one of them was extremely positive. But I would also say that I was, late teens, early 20s. And so the takeaway was different at that stage in my life than I would imagine than it would be now.
And yeah, you definitely have much more experiences and many more emotions in play now, because psilocybin mushrooms, they're very emotional based. Right. They very much amplify the emotions that you need to express at that particular time to get them out. And but setting plays an important part. So if you were a young man, I would imagine you were doing them kind of in a party setting or in a nature setting.
No, it was nature setting.
Okay,
maybe
smart.
Once, not party, but parties, but like get-togethers with friends and stuff. But it was always a very safe and natural and kind of holistic experience, and one that I enjoyed tremendously, just from the visual nature of it, the sonic nature of it, the getting a better understanding and perspective of Earth and the world. Yeah. And I mean, to me, it was very clear that, the Earth is a living thing, that, everything sort of comes alive, and it's wonderful experience. I don't know how, would view it now, and I would do it again. I'm curious, because you've, over the last year, you've done this a number of times, right?
I've done it 11 times.
Right, 11 times. Tonight will be 12.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so at 11, 12 times, what draws you back?
Great question.
What and what, is there a compounding effect to what you're understanding about yourself?
Yeah, there is. There's a compounding effect. I mean, sure, can you do an ayahuasca experience and just do it once and get everything that you need? Of course you can. But, for me, the original thing was going to it, and I did it for the very first time on September 11th. Very important day for me. So it was about overcoming my traumatic past. Again, those that are just catching this podcast right now should probably watch the previous one so they kind of understand the forces that led me into giving it a try for the first time. But it's as if when you're on ayahuasca and you're going through this ceremony and you've set an intention, your intention basically is the course you want this ship to go in, like what you're hoping to get out of it. And rather than just floating around willy-nilly and just trying to have a great time, you're really trying to say, listen, I'm doing this ceremony for this reason. And you pick just one reason. And you want that problem to present itself during the ceremony so you can figure out a way to be comfortable with it or to move past it. And, as you know, I've had a lot of experiences in my life that I want to move past,
right,
that I want to grow from, or I want to learn from. And so that's the reason why I've done it 11 times. Like, sure, the experience is amazing while you're under it because you get to experience life with no restraints. You get the entire energy spectrum, life spectrum that you possibly can experience for a few hours at a time. It's almost as if you're transported to another universe and you're floating around in an ocean, and that water is the most immense love and knowledge of your life. I use this analogy, thanks to my wonderful friend Tabor for telling it to me. But it's as if you get to leave and come back with a tablespoon of that water that you get to live every single day. And I keep wanting to go back and getting more tablespoons of that water because, it's not just about going to that experience and enjoying the moment while it is, but integrating afterwards helps you develop who you are as a person. Every single time I've grown substantially since doing the ceremony. Every single time. And who doesn't want to continue to grow? Now, I've continued to grow with other means. I'm reading or listening to a massive amount of books. Now I no longer even drive in the car without listening to some book, audiobook. And I'm working, with my clients. Now with the Tantra clients, you were privy to go to the Tantra workshop that I was teaching at, but I do a lot of personal one-on-one or couples work therapeutic sessions with my clients in the Tantra realm. And each one gives me an opportunity to understand somebody else's problems in life and figure out a creative way for them to move around it. And I could not be able to do that if I didn't have problems in my own world that I was able to find solutions around. And every single time I go and do ayahuasca, those issues are presented to me, and the roadmap around them are also presented to me. And it gives me a vast amount of knowledge that I can utilize to help my clients. And one of the things that I love about how the brain works is I, for years, did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and I love the sport. And the biggest growth that you could have in that sport is that, sure, you can gain knowledge by going to classes and learning from an instructor and getting chances to roll around and what we call rolling, which is like free sparring, grappling at 100% with somebody else that's resisting you the entire time. But the biggest growing moments for me was when I needed to learn something in order to teach it to somebody else. The brain works in a very strange way. If you want to memorize something very fast, start to memorize it and then teach it to somebody else. Because once the brain switches from handling the knowledge and soaking it in to needing to tap into that knowledge that's sitting in your brain and transmute it out your mouth and convey it to somebody else, it utilizes a different part of the brain. And when you start to utilize that part of the brain, your frontal cortex, when you have to figure out a way that you can spit that knowledge out in a very digestible form to somebody else, that's when you truly understand what it is. Like, that's the best way to memorize something. It's been proven over and over and over again. Become a teacher. Teach somebody. You don't have to sign up and start teaching a class, but if you really want to know something and you have kids, even better, because they need to learn any sort of knowledge they possibly can, but just like study something and then put the books away and take that knowledge and present it to somebody else. Once you've presented it to somebody else, and for me with my tantra work, I present it to somebody else as a creative solution for them to work around their issues. Well, it's the best way for me to memorize something, the best way for me to utilize that for other clients down the road. It's profound. It's wonderful. And each time I go to these ayahuasca ceremonies, I get to sit down with the best tutor in the world to teach me all these wonderful things. It's almost as if Mother Nature is teaching me. It's almost as if this goddess-like form is sitting there with me and saying, listen, these are the problems that you've faced in life, and this is your roadmap that you could have done things different, or congratulations, you did this one correct, or hey, why don't you give this a try? And this will be your way that you overcome it energetically and mentally and physically, so you can move on and grow as a person. And every single, all those 11 times, it's like I've gone to Harvard every time and I've learned from the best professors. It's amazing. It really is.
Interesting. That's a great way to put it.
And when I combine, because everybody calls ayahuasca Pachamama or Mother Earth, it's as if you're learning from the first mother in history, like this godly goddess mother-like form who's comforting and loving you and showing you the way. And when you do them with ayahuasca and psilocybin mushrooms, the entire night I felt like I was learning my lessons from both parents, because the mushrooms are very masculine in nature, is what they say, and they, of course, they come from the earth as well. And it's as if you're sitting there in that same lecture hall, and now, instead of just your mom teaching you, now you have the benefit of both your parents chiming in and teaching you how to do something. And that's what made it the massive difference. I mean, what most people don't realize is these mushrooms, there are 3 orders in the world. There's the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, and, the, what would you call it? Mushrooms are coming from the fungi kingdom, I guess. So 3 kingdoms. Mushroom material outweighs, the mushroom material that's on this earth outweighs all the animal material, all the cellular animal material, all the animals combined. I'm talking insects, I'm talking humans, I'm talking cows, I'm talking crocodiles, I'm talking every animal that's living right now. And you combine that with the mass of all the world's trees, and you put those together, well, guess what? Fungi still outnumbers in total volume, still outnumbers us. The oldest living organism on Earth, a fungi. The largest living organism on Earth, I believe it's in Oregon, is a fungus that lives underneath an entire forest. It's all one fungus. They're all interconnected. It's like a superhighway, a network. There's a really good documentary called Fantastic Fungi that's on Netflix.
I think I've
by
seen it.
Dr. Paul Stamets. This guy is a super genius who wasn't trained in dealing with, learning and teaching, fungus and mushrooms, but he is the world's leading expert on it as an amateur. He was trained and educated in something else.
But is this the documentary
he's
that
a mycologist,
talks about
that's what
how
is.
that there are these almost like nervous systems of fungus below the forest that are used as a means for the plants and trees to communicate with one
That's
another?
the exact same one.
That's fascinating.
Isn't it great?
Yeah.
And so it gets you to think. I mean, there's a reason why this these mushrooms, this fungus, has this special property. And this special property, There's an entire evolutionary theory called the stoned ape theory. Have you heard that?
I think so, yeah, but refresh me.
So they believe, I mean, the human brain over a small period had a vast evolution in brain size capacity. And they tailor it down to a possibility of two things. One, cooked meat. When you cook meat, it starts to, the fat molecules and the protein molecules, there's a change. And that over 1,000 years, just the extra that change in those proteins help change the course of the evolution of a species. The same thing for mushrooms. And we're dealing with, for those that are creationists, you might want to close your ears right now, but for those that are evolutionists, we came out of the Great Horn of Africa, and on those plains, even to this day, you've got massive herds of animals. What do animals do that are eating plants all day? They shit. Here we are talking about shit twice in one podcast. Mm-hmm. They shit. Well, what grows out of that shit? Those mushrooms.
Yeah.
Well, before we were these amazing hunters, before we had tools, bows and arrows, before we had spears, before we had even clubs, we were scavengers, just like wolves, just like hyenas. We relied on other animals to make the kill, and then we would pick those bones apart if we could chase those animals away. Well, if these early humanoids, these early hominids are walking around a plain full of tons of animals that are producing tons of manure, that are producing tons of mushrooms, and they're picking things off the ground to try to find out if they're edible over thousands of years, well, there's a very good likelihood that they're picking up these mushrooms and having these experiences. And so the stoned ape theory, for anybody that, is inspired to want to research about it, there's and I'm an idiot. Trust me, there are many more smarter men than me that have figured this out and have done the actual research on it. They believe that mushrooms contributed to that explosion in our brain size. Because we were ground-dwelling primates. And just in the same manner as gorillas. That's the reason why gorillas share a large DNA, percentage to us compared to some of the other great apes.
Yes, or
continue.
We're a crossbreed.
Aliens came down and
I'm not saying that
there's a good likelihood about that.
I'm not saying that this stoned ape thing didn't contribute to a continued sense of evolution, but there is a clear demarcation in history when we went for literally thousands of years living in caves using stone tools and the most rudimentary basics of communication, and then literally it's almost like overnight there's a massive flourishing of the human species on the planet Earth, back to the Fertile Crescent, and it's like all of a sudden you have written languages, cities, civilizations, governments, education, almost overnight.
Oh, you're right. I mean, we really kind of leave that gap between Neanderthals and Stone Age to early Mesopotamia. Nobody really talks about the bridge that happened between the two. Mm-hmm. But we've got, I can't pronounce it, Gehegli Tepe or whatever, that lost civilization that they had found that predates Mesopotamia, that has these amazing stone carvings and amazing, precise carvings. I don't know. I mean, I believe that's a possibility as well, but we'll never truly know. I could watch as many ancient alien documentaries on the History Channel as I possibly can, but I don't know. Maybe a cultivation of those three things. Maybe it was meat, mushrooms, and aliens.
Could be. I mean, it could be a large. Yeah, listen, I mean, it's never one thing. There's always a number of ingredients in any recipe that cause. I am a believer in that
extraterrestrial life.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and I am a believer that that our species is a genetically engineered species. That's what I believe, right? Based on what I've read and what I've been exposed to, that's what I choose to believe at this point until some information comes along and either suggests that that's not accurate or otherwise. That's that's where I operate. And I believe in God. I believe in a lot of, I believe in a lot of the basic fundamental things that are considered regular, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to, the creation and evolution of our species, that I do tend to fall into that camp.
Yeah. I mean, I gotta say, I mean, I'm firmly in the stoned ape theory thing too, but I've watched and I've read Chariots of the God. Amazing book, and of course they've got the video documentary about it as well. Graham Hancock, I think the author's name was. I mean, he was the first to really start talking about the fact that these ancient civilizations really had some influence. And I got to say, I mean, if you look at the hieroglyphics, and there's a lot of very strange things that are presented with strange beings and strange flying crafts and things like that, and not just in one culture or civilization, for multitude of different ones from around the world.
Well, the book that I read most of was The 12th Planet by Zecharia Sitchin.
Okay.
And he's, some people think he's the greatest, other people think he's a total fraud. I mean, just go figure.
Yeah.
But he was a scholar of the ancient languages, and he was able to, his thing is that he was able to decipher and translate, the ancient texts in cuneiform that were found in Mesopotamia and Samaria, and told of this, this story. And so that's one of the pieces of information that that has helped shape my thought process on this. But again, it's just like, we all have our viewpoints and our opinions, and I love the number 12, and I hate to say it because I don't mean to be looking at my watch, but unfortunately I have a call at 2 that I have to be on. So I feel that I have to kind of tie us down a little bit here, or tie us up temporarily before I would like to, because I'd like to delve into this topic. But the 12th planet was based on this theory that there were actually 12 celestial bodies, right? And that it counted in our solar system. Let's see, it was the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. I think they counted the moon in there and one other thing, but that there was a larger...
Yeah.
No, there was 11, right? But the 12th planet was a much larger planet that orbited through our solar system on a large elliptical path.
I see.
And that's where the great civilization lived, right? And and this whole story, talks about how Earth was formed, how the asteroid belt came to be, how plate tectonics and all of it's more than just alien stuff. But that really grasped me. But I know
what I'm going to be Googling and listening to on the ride back home.
Yeah, check it out. And there's a lot of people that say it's all horseshit, and maybe it is. But we all choose our stories that. But
isn't that what life is great about? I mean,
right.
Like, we're creative thinkers. I mean, we can't always just accept the narrative. I mean, trying to figure these things out. Mm-hmm. Just like you playing the guitar while your wife is away and worrying about and stressing, like diving deep into making yourself a better musician. Hey, sometimes it's great to have a hobby, or it's great to have something that you're like, hey, I want to really dive into this and try to get a good knowledge of it, because creative thinking is important.
So I share this with you today on the day of your 12th journey. I share with you this concept of the 12th planet, written by Zecharia Sitchin, and you can.
I'll visit that 12th planet tonight and take a look around. I'll tell you what I find.
I look forward to hearing the reports. And again, I hate to wrap us up. I really don't want to, because I think there's a lot that we can talk about. But I also need to provide proper time for me to transition back into my day job.
I understand.
As a advertising guy for the retail car business.
Makes sense.
Jason, I appreciate you, man. It's been nice spending more time with you, and I look
appreciate
forward
it
to as well. And I wish you a very safe and spiritual journey this evening, and may it continue to reveal what it is that you are learning about yourself.
Thank you very much.
All right.
I'm happy that you had me out today.
Great. I appreciate it. Cool. Thanks, Jason. Till next time.
Thank you very much.
All right.